So if you've got a bike like this one or maybe something similar, then in today's video I'm going to show you how I did a basic service. We changed the oil and the oil filter, the spark plug and the air filter. And not to worry if your bike is not exactly the same as this one, what you see in today's video will hopefully give you some good guidance on how to get the job done on your specific bike. And as you're watching the video, please share any tips and tricks that you might think of or know of that you want to share with everybody so that we can all learn. And talking about your specific bike, it might be a good idea to get a service manual just in case there are any specific procedures that need to be followed. That said, let's get into the servicing. So I'll start off by first removing the engine oil filler bolt, and then I'll go ahead and clean the area around the oil drain plug, and I'm just using a little bit of brake cleaner and some clean paper towel. And once that's done, I'll slide an oil catch pan underneath the drain plug, I'll crack it loose, remove it, and then just wait for the oil to drain out. Now also something to note here, I did take the bike for a ride for it to warm up before draining the oil. You'll also notice that I do tilt the bike backwards while it's standing on the center stand, and that is just to get the last little bit of oil out of the system. Now while I wait for the last bit of oil to dribble out, I'm going to go ahead and change the oil filter. So the oil filter is behind this little removable side cover, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the three 6mm cap screws and then just pop it off. Now sometimes these covers may be a little bit sticky and they may need a light bump before they come off. So yeah, I'm giving it a light tap with a dead blow hammer and then it comes off. And here is the oil filter, and it is pretty nasty, definitely time to be replaced. Now before installing the new filter, I'll go ahead and clean the filter cap and I'll clean inside the filter housing. And I'll also carefully pull off any of the stuck O-rings and seals and give them a clean. So here's the new oil filter, and I ended up getting this from our local Yamaha dealership. Now this bike uses a replaceable paper style oil filter, the one that you're looking at here. However, if your bike has a centrifugal oil filter, something like what you'll find on some of the Hondas, I've got another video that'll show you how to get this oil filter cleaned out. And I'll link that in the description and also at the end of this video. So I'll go ahead and pop the oil filter and the O-ring seals back in and then tighten up the cover. Actually, just before I close it up, you'll notice that the oil filler is blanked off on one side and the other side has a bit of a hole in it. Now the side with the hole goes over the little metal tab that is sticking out of the cover. It's also definitely a good idea to get new O-ring seals. These are pretty cheap, so just go ahead and get them. But in my case, I'm not sure exactly why I didn't order them, but I didn't, unfortunately, so I'll have to reuse my old ones. But thankfully, these still feel like they are in pretty good shape, so there shouldn't be a problem to reuse them. According to the service manual I have, these three bolts need to be torqued to 10 Newton meters. But in this case, I just nipped them up with a ratchet. Now you really want to be careful not to over tighten these and then strip out the threads, and then you're going to have a much bigger repair job on your hands. Now just one thing, before you fill up with new oil, please remember to install the drain plug. You don't want to be pouring in that new oil and it just runs out the bottom of the motor and you don't actually notice what's happening. And in this case, I'm just going to give it a quick clean before installing a new copper sealing washer. It's also a good idea to just install a new copper washer. These things are super cheap and then you've got very little chance of it leaking. However, if you don't have a new washer, it's not the end of the world. You can sometimes reuse the old washer. Just look carefully after you've done the job to make sure that it's not leaking. Now before I put in the drain plug, I'm also going to wipe up any spilt oil underneath the motor, and then I'm going to screw it in and tighten up the drain plug. And again, the manual calls for this to be tightened to 20 Newton meters. Now this is arguably the most important step of today's video. Please don't forget to add new oil into your engine. Now because I've replaced the oil filter, the engine requires 1.45 liters of oil. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit less than that, around 1.4 liters. Now the reason I'm doing this is so that I don't end up overfilling the oil. Now I would rather check after the engine has run and the oil has had a time to kind of settle down. And then if I need to, I'd rather add in a small amount of oil rather than having to try and reduce the amount of oil because I've overfilled it. And then lastly, I'm going to start the bike, check that the engine light doesn't come on once it's started, and then I'm going to let it idle for a few minutes. And also, while it's idling, I'll go ahead and check for any oil leaks. Now, after a few minutes, I'll shut the bike off, then I'm going to wait a few minutes more for the oil to run and settle down, and then I'm going to check the oil level, and I'll top it up if needed. So that was the oil and the oil filter change. And next up, I'll show you how I change the spark plug. But before we do, something to note though, I have let the bike's engine cool down. Now, I've done it like this just for videoing purposes, but if you guys want to be a little bit more efficient at what you do, then after your oil change and before you start up the bike and let it warm up, go ahead and change the spark plug and also change the air filter. The air filter change, you're going to see it's coming up shortly. And once you've done all of that, then you can actually go ahead, start up the bike, let it warm up, and then let the oil run down and then check the oil level once again. Now the reason we do this is because we don't want to be pulling out or untightening and pulling out spark plugs out of a hot engine. This is not a recommended practice. So as I said, I've just done it like this for videoing purposes, but you can do it a more efficient way. Okay, let's get into changing that spark plug. So I'm going to start by pulling off the spark plug cap, and then I'm going to grab a number 18 spanner to loosen the spark plug. You can also use an 18mm spark plug socket, but I found that a gooseneck spanner works pretty damn well in this situation. Now once the plug is loose, you should be able to completely unscrew it by hand. And this is what the plug looks like after a few thousand kilometers. So before installing the new plug, you definitely want to check that the spark plug gap is set correctly. And the manual I'm using calls for a gap of 0.6 to 0.7 millimeters. Something to note here is that the new spark plug should easily thread in by hand all the way until it bottoms out on the sealing washer. If it is not going in easy, rather don't force it, just remove it, check the threads that they're all in good condition, because you definitely don't want to strip the threads, because that is definitely going to turn into a much bigger repair project. And once the plug is seated, the manual says to tighten the plug to 17.5 Newton meters or a half a turn past finger tight if you don't have a torque wrench. And once that is all nice and tight, I go ahead and then I press the spark plug cap back into place. Also, if you look on the box of the specific spark plug that you are using, on the back there should be an indication of how tight to make this specific spark plug. But what happens if you take the spark plug out and you see the old one is actually still fine and you want to reuse it? Well, then the tightening procedure is slightly different. So I went to the NGK's website and I had a look, and what they recommend is tightening it by hand until it seats, and then you tighten it a further 30 degrees, which is about 1/8 of a turn, and no more than that. You don't really want to over torque the spark plug because on a used spark plug, the sealing washer has already been crushed, so there's not a lot of give. And if you over torque it, you might end up stretching or damaging the spark plug threads, or worst case scenario, snapping it off. Hopefully that never happens to you. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's get on to the air filter change. So we can get access to the air filter behind the right side cover, and to remove the side cover, the seat needs to be removed. Then there are 2 screws that need to be removed before the side cover can be unclipped. Now there are 2 press clips or studs behind this cover. Now these can sometimes be a little bit stiff to unclip, especially if the rubber grommets are old and they've gone hard. And sometimes what happens is that the plastic mounting breaks completely off, and then the cover kind of just flaps around. Then I'll go ahead and remove the 4 screws that hold the air filter cover in place, and of course remove the filter cover itself. And finally, I have access to the filter. Now the white plastic frame that I'm currently removing should actually have a sponge filter around it. So where is it? Well, in preparation for this video, I needed to buy, of course, all the service parts before actually making the video. And our local spares dealer asked me to bring around a sample air filter to check that it was the correct size and shape before they ordered it. And well, that old filter never came back from the dealer. I threw it away there and then, not actually thinking that I still need to film this segment of the video. But not to worry, the new filter, however, looks like this. So to install the new filter, there is a small plastic clasp that needs to be opened up, and then the sponge turned the right way around so that it matches the shape of the plastic frame. And then the frame can be kind of inserted or slid inside the middle of the sponge filter. You can see that this takes a little bit of working back and forth, but just be careful not to pull too hard and tear the sponge. Now once it's all the way in, there are two small holes in the sponge that can be hooked over the little plastic tabs, and then that little plastic clasp can be clipped closed. Now before installing any of these foam filters, oil needs to be applied to the filter. The service manual calls for engine oil to be used, but I'm going to use the Motrex air filter oil spray. And this stuff is really sticky. It works very well. And once that's done, now I can finally install the filter back into the bike and screw on that side cover. So these are the two press clips that I was talking about earlier, and you can hopefully see that there is a small amount of red rubber grease on the grommets and also on the little push studs. So when I push it in, the cover should easily clip into place. And once that's done, I can screw in the last two screws and clip the seat back onto the bike, and that is it. So just keep in mind that these are not the only items that need to be serviced on a motorbike. There are many more over and above what I've showed you today. So it is probably a good idea to go get out your service manual and check for your specific bike all of the items that need to be done and when they need to be done. If you found the video useful, please give it a thumbs up. Please share it with anybody else that you think this video might help, or they may be interested in stuff like this. And also I will link another video either to my left or to my right here, something else that you're probably also going to be interested in. Thank you very much for watching. Oh yeah, and I forgot, leave us a comment. Let us know what motorcycle you have and the service items that you regularly do. Or if there's anything else that you want to add, maybe you've got your own tips and tricks that you want to share with us, please go ahead so that we can all learn. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time. Cheers.